The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the dusty outpost, and Katherine Sinclair stepped down into the scorching Nevada heat with nothing but a worn carpetbag and desperation clinging to her like a second skin. She had traveled 3 weeks from Philadelphia to reach Owyhee, a silver mining town that promised opportunities for those brave enough to seek them. Though at this moment, she wondered if bravery or foolishness had brought her west. The year was 1872, and Katherine had left behind a life of genteel poverty after her father's debts had consumed everything following his death. Her aunt had suggested marriage to a wealthy merchant twice her age, but Katherine had refused, choosing instead the uncertain promise of the frontier. She was 22 years old, educated enough to teach school, and hopeful that this rough country might offer her something Philadelphia never could: independence. The main street of Owyhee stretched before her, a collection of weathered wooden buildings that looked like they might blow away in a strong wind. Miners trudged past, their faces begrimed with silver dust. Women in faded calico dresses hurried about their business, eyes downcast. The whole town seemed to pulse with a raw energy that both frightened and exhilarated her. Katherine approached the nearest person, an older woman sweeping the boardwalk in front of a general store. "Excuse me, madam. I'm looking for the schoolhouse. I was hired by mail to teach here." The woman looked her up and down, taking in Katherine's travel-stained but well-made dress. "Schoolhouse burned down 2 months back. Lightning strike. Ain't been rebuilt yet and probably won't be for a while. The mining company controls most of the money round here, and they don't see the profit in educating children." Katherine's heart sank. "But I was promised employment. I traveled all this way." "Welcome to Nevada territory, miss. Promises are cheap as dirt out here." The woman's expression softened slightly. "You might try the boarding house down the street. Mrs. Caldwell runs it. She might know of work, though I can't promise nothing." Katherine thanked her and made her way down the dusty street, each step feeling heavier than the last. The boarding house was a 2-story structure that leaned slightly to the left, its paint long since surrendered to the elements. A sign hanging from the porch proclaimed it Caldwell's Respectable Lodgings for Ladies and Gentlemen. Mrs. Caldwell turned out to be a stout woman with sharp eyes and an appraising manner. She listened to Katherine's situation with pursed lips. "Teaching position, you say? That's unfortunate about the school. I heard they hired someone, didn't realize she hadn't been notified about the fire." "That's poor management, that is." "Is there any other work available?" Katherine asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. She had spent nearly all her money on the journey west. Not much for a lady of refinement. "The saloons always need girls, but I don't reckon that's what you're after." Mrs. Caldwell studied her for a long moment. "I could use help here at the boarding house. Cooking, cleaning, laundry. It wouldn't pay much, but you'd have a room and meals. It's honest work." Katherine felt the last of her pride crumble. She had come west dreaming of teaching children, of building something meaningful, and now she would be scrubbing floors. But she had no choice. "I'll take it, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. It's hard work, and the miners who stay here can be demanding. But you keep your head down and your wits about you, you'll manage fine." Mrs. Caldwell showed her to a small room under the eaves, barely large enough for a narrow bed and a washstand. "You'll start tomorrow morning. Breakfast is at 5. That night, Katherine lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the town settling around her. Piano music drifted from the saloons, punctuated by occasional shouts and laughter. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. She thought of her father, of the comfortable house they had once lived in, of her dreams of independence that now seemed childishly naive. She allowed herself one bout of tears, then dried her eyes and resolved to face whatever came with dignity. The next morning arrived too early. Katherine rose in darkness and made her way down to the kitchen, where Mrs. Caldwell was already stoking the fire in the massive iron stove. "You'll help me with breakfast," the older woman said briskly. "We serve 23 boarders currently, all men except for Miss Pritchard, who's a seamstress, and old Mrs. Yu, whose son works in the mines. The men expect eggs, bacon, potatoes, and coffee. Hot biscuits, too, if we have time." Katherine had never cooked for more than her father and herself, but she threw herself into the work, determined not to fail at this as well. Her hands grew clumsy with the unfamiliar tasks, and she burned the first batch of biscuits, but Mrs. Caldwell merely grunted and told her to try again. The boarders began filing in as dawn broke over the mountains. They were a rough assortment of miners, merchants, and drifters, most of them too focused on their food to pay her much attention. Katherine kept her eyes down as she served, painfully aware of her new station in life. Then he walked in. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the doorframe. His hair was the color of wheat in late summer, and his eyes were a startling blue-green that reminded her of the ocean she had seen once as a child. He wore dusty range clothes and a gun belt slung low on his hips, but there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested more than the rough cowboy he appeared to be. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing that sun-bleached hair, and nodded politely to Mrs. Caldwell. "Morning, madam. I'm looking for lodging for a few weeks while I conduct some business in town. Do you have a room available?" His voice was deep and pleasant, with a slight accent Katherine couldn't quite place. Mrs. Caldwell nodded. "I've got one room left. $3 a week includes meals. No drinking, fighting, or entertaining women in the rooms." "That sounds fine." He pulled out his wallet and counted out bills. As he did, his eyes landed on Katherine and he smiled. It was a genuine smile, warm and kind, and it made something flutter in her chest. "Morning, miss." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Good morning, sir." She quickly looked away, focusing on the coffee pot in her hands. "This here's Miss Sinclair," Mrs. Caldwell said. "She's new, helping me run the place. Miss Sinclair, this is Mr. Grant Carson. He's a rancher from California, if I recall correctly from your last stay." "That's right. I run a spread near Sacramento. Come out here periodically to buy horses from the Paiute." Grant extended his hand to Katherine, a gesture that seemed almost too formal for the rough setting. She shook it briefly, acutely aware of how calloused his palm was, how strong his grip. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Carson. The pleasure's mine, Miss Sinclair." He held her gaze for a moment longer than strictly necessary, and Katherine found herself unable to look away. Then he released her hand and took a seat at the long table. Over the following days, Katherine fell into the grueling routine of the boarding house. She woke before dawn to help prepare breakfast, spent the morning washing dishes and making beds, the afternoon doing laundry and preparing dinner, and the evening cleaning up again. Her hands, once soft and carefully tended, grew red and chapped. Her back ached constantly, and she fell into bed each night exhausted beyond measure, but there were small mercies. Mrs. Caldwell proved to be a fair employer, quick to correct, but also to praise when Katherine did well. The other boarders mostly ignored her, which she preferred. And then there was Grant Carson. He had a way of noticing things. On the third morning, when Katherine was struggling with a heavy pot of porridge, he quietly took it from her hands and carried it to the table. "That's too heavy for you to be lifting," he said simply. "I can manage," Katherine protested, though her arms were trembling with relief. "I'm sure you can. But there's no shame in accepting help when it's offered." He set the pot down gently and returned to his seat, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Another time, she was carrying an enormous basket of wet laundry out to the clothesline behind the boarding house when the bottom gave way, spilling sheets and shirts into the dust. She stood there staring at the disaster, fighting back tears of frustration. She would have to wash everything again. "That's some bad luck." Grant's voice came from behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. He knelt down and began gathering the fallen laundry. "Here, let's get this picked up." "You don't need to do that," Katherine said, but she knelt beside him anyway, grateful for the help. "I know I don't want to." He worked methodically, his large hands surprisingly gentle with the fabric. "You're from back east, aren't you? I can hear it in your voice." "Philadelphia." Katherine hesitated, then added, "I came out here to teach school, but the schoolhouse burned down." "That's rough." He looked at her with sympathy. "So now you're working here." "It's honest work," she said, echoing Mrs. Caldwell's words, trying to convince herself as much as him. "It is, but it's not what you hoped for." He loaded the last of the laundry into her arms, having somehow repaired the broken basket with a piece of rope from his pocket. "Don't give up on your dreams, Miss Sinclair. This territory has a way of testing folks, but good things come to those who persevere." His words stayed with her as she rewashed the laundry, as she hung each piece carefully on the line. There was something about Grant Carson that made her feel less alone, less foolish for having come west with such naive hopes. She found herself watching for him at meals, noticed the way he always thanked her when she served him, how he never spoke roughly or made crude jokes like some of the other boarders. He treated her with a respect that felt revolutionary in this rough place where women were either put on pedestals or treated as property. One evening, about 2 weeks after Grant's arrival, Katherine was in the kitchen after dinner, finishing the last of the dishes. Her hands were submerged in hot soapy water when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Grant standing in the doorway, hat in hand. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Miss Sinclair. I was hoping I might have a word." Katherine dried her hands on her apron, suddenly nervous. "Of course, Mr. Carson." He shifted his weight, and she realized with surprise that he seemed nervous too. "I've noticed you haven't had much time to yourself since you started working here. I was wondering if you might like to take a walk tomorrow evening after dinner. Just around town, get some air. Mrs. Caldwell has already given her permission if you're willing." Katherine's heart began to beat faster. A walk with Grant Carson. She should probably refuse. She barely knew him and it would be improper. But something in his earnest expression, in the respectful way he waited for her answer, made her want to accept. "I'd like that," she said quietly. His face lit up with a smile that transformed his already handsome features into something extraordinary. "That's wonderful. I'll meet you on the front porch at 7. 7, she agreed. After he left, Katherine returned to her dishes with trembling hands. What was she doing? She had come west to build an independent life, not to be courted by a cowboy, however kind he might be. But even as she thought this, she couldn't suppress the flutter of excitement in her chest. The next day passed with agonizing slowness. Katherine fumbled through her tasks, earning a sharp look from Mrs. Caldwell. Finally, evening arrived. She changed into her best dress, a simple but well-made garment of deep blue that brought out her eyes. She brushed her dark hair until it shone and pinned it up carefully. Looking at herself in the small mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. In just a few weeks, the sun had brought color to her pale skin, and the hard work had given her a strength that showed in the set of her shoulders. Grant was waiting on the porch, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. He offered his arm and they set off down the street together. The evening air was cooler than the day's heat, pleasant after the stuffiness of the kitchen. The setting sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "Tell me about your ranch," Katherine said as they walked. What's it like in California? Grant's expression became animated. It's beautiful country. Green, especially in spring. My spread is in the valley, good grazing land. I've been building it up for about 5 years now. Started with nothing but 100 acres I won in a card game and a handful of half-wild Mustangs. You won it in a card game. Katherine couldn't help but smile at the improbability of it. He laughed, a rich sound that made something warm unfurl in her chest. I know it sounds unlikely, but the fellow who owned it was desperate and I was lucky that night. Luckiest night of my life, as it turned out. That land is my future. I've got about 500 head of cattle now and I breed horses on the side. Good horses, trained gentle. That's why I come out here to buy from the Paiute. They're the best horsemen I've ever seen, and they're willing to trade if you treat them fairly. Katherine listened, fascinated. It sounds wonderful, difficult but wonderful. It is both those things. Grant guided her around a rough patch in the road. What about you, Miss Sinclair? What made you decide to come west? Katherine hesitated. She hadn't spoken of her circumstances to anyone in Owyhee. But something about Grant's honest interest made her want to confide in him. My father died 6 months ago. He left nothing but debts. My aunt wanted me to marry a wealthy merchant who could pay off what was owed, but I couldn't bear the thought. So when I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Owyhee, I applied. I thought I could make a life for myself out here, independent and respectable. And instead, you found the school burned down and yourself working as a maid, Grant said gently. That must have been a terrible disappointment. It is. Katherine blinked back sudden tears. I'm grateful to Mrs. Caldwell for giving me work, truly I am. But sometimes I wonder if I should have just married Mr. Pemberton and accepted my lot. Grant stopped walking and turned to face her. His eyes were serious. No. You did the right thing. Marriage should be based on affection and respect, not desperation. You chose freedom, even though it meant hardship. That takes courage. I don't feel very courageous. I feel like a fool who traveled 3,000 miles for nothing. Not for nothing. Grant's hand reached out and gently touched her arm. You're here, aren't you? You're surviving, making your way in difficult circumstances. That's everything. And who knows what the future might hold? Maybe the school will be rebuilt. Maybe other opportunities will come. The West is full of possibilities, Miss Sinclair. His words, combined with the warmth of his touch, made Katherine feel stronger somehow. She looked up at him, at his earnest face and kind eyes, and felt something shift inside her. This man, this near stranger, had shown her more genuine kindness in 2 weeks than anyone in Philadelphia had shown her in months. Thank you, Mr. Carson, for the walk and for your kindness. It means more than you know. It's Grant, please. And you're welcome, though I haven't done anything special. Just treating you the way any decent person should. But that was special, Katherine realized. Kindness was special, particularly in this harsh country where everyone was struggling to survive. As they continued their walk, talking easily about everything and nothing, she found herself hoping this wouldn't be their last evening together. Over the following weeks, their evening walks became a regular occurrence. Grant extended his stay in Owyhee, citing ongoing horse negotiations, though Katherine suspected that wasn't the only reason. They talked about everything under the stars. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about coming west after the war, about his dreams of building his ranch into something substantial. She told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, her love of books, her father's slow descent into debt, and despair after her mother's death. He gave up, Katherine said one evening as they sat on a bench overlooking the silver mines that glittered in the moonlight. After Mama died, he just gave up on everything, started drinking, making bad investments. I tried to help, but I was only 17. I didn't know how to save him from himself. Grant took her hand in his, a gesture that had become natural between them. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. That's a hard truth, but it's truth nonetheless. You did what you could. His hand was warm and strong around hers, and Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. Sometimes I'm so angry with him. He left me with nothing, not even a home. And then I feel guilty for being angry because he's dead and I loved him. You can love someone and still be angry with them. Those feelings can exist together. Grant squeezed her hand gently. My father was a hard man, bitter after the war. He never said a kind word to me that I can recall, but I still mourned him when he passed. We're complicated creatures, humans. We contain multitudes. Katherine looked at him in surprise. That's from Walt Whitman. You know Whitman, Grant smiled. I do indeed. Surprised, I suppose I am. You don't fit my idea of what a rancher should be. And what should a rancher be? I don't know. Rough, uneducated. More concerned with cattle than poetry. I can be concerned with both. Grant's tone was light, teasing. I didn't have much formal schooling, but I love to read. Always have. I carry books in my saddlebags when I travel, currently working my way through Shakespeare's tragedies. Katherine felt her respect for him grow even deeper. Which is your favorite? Hamlet, I think. All that uncertainty, that wrestling with duty and desire, I find it remarkably human. He paused, then added quietly, There's a line I've been thinking about lately. Doubt thou the stars are fire, doubt that the sun doth move, doubt truth to be a liar, but never doubt I love. Beautiful, isn't it? Katherine's breath caught. Was he suggesting what she thought he was suggesting? Her heart began to race. Very beautiful, she managed to say. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands intertwined, watching the stars wheel overhead. Katherine had never felt so at peace, so perfectly content, as she did in this moment. The hardships of her new life seemed bearable with Grant beside her, but she knew this couldn't last. Grant would have to return to his ranch eventually, and she would remain here, working at the boarding house. The thought filled her with a sadness she didn't want to examine too closely. As if reading her thoughts, Grant said softly, Katherine, I need to talk to you about something. Her heart sank. Here it came, the goodbye she had been dreading. What is it? I've stayed in Owyhee far longer than I intended. My foreman is probably wondering if I've been eaten by wolves. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I need to get back to the ranch soon. But before I go, I want you to know something. Katherine waited, barely breathing. These past weeks with you have been some of the happiest of my life. I didn't come to Nevada looking for anything except horses, but I found something infinitely more valuable. I found you. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. I know we haven't known each other long. I know you came west seeking independence, not another man telling you what to do, but I have to be honest with you about my feelings. Grant, Katherine whispered, but he pressed on. I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I've already fallen. I admire your strength, your courage, your intelligence. I love the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. I love your laugh, which I don't hear nearly often enough. I love everything about you, Katherine Sinclair, and I can't leave Owyhee without telling you that. Katherine felt tears spill down her cheeks. I'm falling in love with you too. I have been for weeks, but I don't know what to do about it. Your life is in California and mine is here such as it is. Come with me, Grant said urgently. Come to California. Marry me, Katherine. I know it's fast. I know you barely know me, but I swear to you I will spend the rest of my life making you happy. You want independence. I'll give you that. You want to teach. We'll start a school on the ranch for the workers' children. You want your own life, your own purpose. I'll support you in whatever you choose. I'm not asking you to give up your dreams. I'm asking you to build new dreams with me. Katherine's mind whirled. Marriage to Grant. Life on a California ranch. It was everything she had told herself she didn't want when she left Philadelphia, but somehow it felt completely different. Grant wasn't asking her to diminish herself, to become less. He was offering partnership, respect, love. "I want to say yes," she said slowly. "But I'm afraid, what if it's too fast? What if we're making a mistake?" "We might be," Grant admitted. "But I don't think so. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Katherine, I asked for your company on a simple walk. You gave me that kindness. In return, I want to give you everything I have. My devotion, my support, my love. Not because you asked for it, but because you deserve it." Katherine looked into his eyes, those blue-green eyes that had captured her attention the first morning they met. She thought about her dreams of independence, of teaching, of making her own way. And she realized that true independence wasn't about being alone. It was about choosing your own path, making your own decisions. And she was choosing Grant. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Grant's face blazed with joy. He pulled her into his arms, and Katherine felt herself enfolded in his strength and warmth. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and finally her lips, a gentle kiss that promised everything she had never dared to hope for. "We'll do this right," Grant said when they finally pulled apart. "I'll talk to the circuit preacher tomorrow. We'll be married before we leave for California, all proper and legal. I want everyone to know you're my wife, that you've chosen me." Katherine laughed through her tears. "I have chosen you, I choose you." They told Mrs. Caldwell that night. The older woman pursed her lips and studied them both with her sharp eyes. "That's rather sudden, isn't it?" "Yes, madam," Grant said respectfully, "but we're both of age and sound mind. I love Katherine and I want to marry her. I promise I'll take good care of her." Mrs. Caldwell transferred her gaze to Katherine. "Is this what you want, girl? You came here looking for independence, not a husband." "I know," Katherine said. "But I've found something better than what I was looking for. Grant doesn't want to control me or diminish me. He wants to build a life with me as partners. That's not giving up independence. That's choosing to share my life with someone I love." The older woman's expression softened. "Well then, I suppose congratulations are in order, though I'll miss your help around here. You've become a good worker." "Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell, for everything. You gave me work when I had nothing, and you've been kind to me. I won't forget that." "Oh, stop before you make me sentimental." But Mrs. Caldwell hugged her nonetheless, a brief, fierce embrace that communicated more than words could. The circuit preacher arrived in Owyhee 3 days later. He was a Methodist minister who traveled between the mining camps, bringing religion and civilization to the rough frontier. Grant spoke with him that very day, and the wedding was arranged for the following Sunday. Katherine had nothing to wear except her work dresses and the blue dress she wore on her walks with Grant. Mrs. Caldwell surprised her by producing a beautiful cream-colored dress from a trunk in her room. "This was my wedding dress 40 years ago. I was about your size then. You should wear it." Katherine held the dress carefully, moved by the generosity. "I couldn't. It's too precious." "Nonsense. It's just been sitting in that trunk gathering dust. I'd be honored if you wore it." Mrs. Caldwell's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Every bride deserves a proper dress." The other boarders, even the rough miners, seemed caught up in the romance of it all. They pitched in to buy Katherine a bouquet of wildflowers, and one of them, a carpenter by trade, spent 2 days building a wooden arbor for the ceremony. The whole town turned out for the wedding, held in the dusty street in front of the boarding house since there was no church in Owyhee. Katherine stood under the arbor, wearing Mrs. Caldwell's dress with wildflowers in her hair, and watched Grant walk toward her. He wore a new suit, probably purchased from the general store, and he looked impossibly handsome. His eyes never left her face as he took his place beside her. The preacher spoke about love and duty, about building a life together through all of life's trials. Katherine barely heard the words. She was too focused on Grant, on the way he held her hands, on the love shining in his eyes. When it came time for vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I, Grant Carson, take you, Katherine Sinclair, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to support your dreams and build new dreams with you. I promise to be your partner in all things, to stand beside you through whatever comes. This I swear before God and these witnesses." Katherine's voice trembled as she spoke her own vows. "I, Katherine Sinclair, take you, Grant Carson, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you with all my heart, to be your partner and your friend. I promise to face the future with you, whatever it may bring. I choose you today and always. This I swear before God and these witnesses." The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Grant kissed her, the assembled crowd cheered. Katherine felt a joy so profound it almost frightened her. After so much loss and disappointment, she had found this. Love, partnership, hope. It seemed almost too good to be true. Mrs. Caldwell hosted a reception at the boarding house, complete with a cake she had baked herself. The miners drank Grant's health and teased him good-naturedly about being caught in the marriage trap. Grant took it all with good humor, his arm never leaving Katherine's waist. As evening fell and the celebration wound down, Grant and Katherine retired to his room at the boarding house. It was their first night together as husband and wife, and Katherine felt nervous butterflies in her stomach. But Grant was gentle and patient, treating her with a tenderness that made her love him even more. When she finally fell asleep in his arms, she felt safe in a way she hadn't since before her father's death. They left Owyhee 2 days later. Grant had purchased a sturdy wagon and team to carry Katherine's few possessions and his supplies. They would travel west through Nevada, then over the Sierra Nevada mountains into California. It was a journey that would take at least 3 weeks, maybe more depending on conditions. Katherine said goodbye to Mrs. Caldwell with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for everything. You saved me when I had nowhere else to turn. You saved yourself, girl. You had the courage to start over, to work hard, to take a chance on love. That's all you." Mrs. Caldwell hugged her tightly. "Write to me sometimes. Let me know how you're getting on." "I will, I promise." The journey west was both harder and more wonderful than Katherine had anticipated. The days were long and exhausting, the sun relentless, the terrain rough. But Grant was endlessly patient, teaching her how to handle the team, how to set up camp, how to read the land. At night, they would sit by their campfire and talk, or Grant would read to her from one of his books. Sometimes they would simply sit in comfortable silence, watching the stars. They passed through small settlements and vast, empty stretches of desert. Grant pointed out landmarks, taught her the names of plants and animals. Katherine had never spent so much time outdoors, and she found herself falling in love with the wild country despite its harshness. One evening, about a week into their journey, they were camped near a small stream. Katherine was washing dishes while Grant tended the horses. Suddenly, she heard him call her name urgently. She dropped the plate she was holding and ran toward him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Look." He pointed across the stream to where a herd of wild horses stood, their coats gleaming in the evening light. There must have been 30 of them, led by a magnificent paint stallion. They were drinking from the stream, unaware of the humans watching them. Katherine held her breath, afraid to move and break the spell. The horses were beautiful beyond words, wild and free in a way that made her heart ache. She reached for Grant's hand without looking away from the herd. "They're incredible," she whispered. "They are. This is what I love about the West. Moments like this, beauty and wildness and freedom." He squeezed her hand. "I'm glad I get to share it with you." They stood together watching until the horses finished drinking and moved on, disappearing into the gathering dusk. Katherine turned to Grant and kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into that kiss. He responded with equal passion, and they stumbled back to their camp, to their bedroll under the stars, and made love with the wild country spreading endlessly around them. The Sierra Nevada mountains were as challenging as Grant had warned. The wagon struggled on the steep roads, and twice they had to unload it and carry supplies by hand over particularly rough stretches. Katherine's muscles ached and her hands, finally beginning to heal from her work at the boarding house, developed new blisters. But she never complained. This was her new life, and she was determined to meet its challenges with strength. Finally, after 23 days of travel, they crested a ridge and Grant pointed to the valley spread below them. "There, that's my land, our land now." Katherine looked down at the vista before her. Rolling grassland dotted with cattle, a house in the distance, trees marking the course of a river. It was beautiful, green and fertile, completely different from the harsh Nevada desert they had crossed. "It's wonderful," she said, meaning it. They made their way down into the valley. As they approached the ranch house, Katherine saw people emerging to greet them. A lean man with weathered features raised his hand in welcome. "Boss, we were starting to worry. You were gone near 2 months." "I'm fine, Sam. Just took longer than expected." Grant helped Katherine down from the wagon. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my wife, Katherine. We were married in Owyhee." The gathered workers, 6 men and 1 woman, stared in surprised silence for a moment. Then the woman, middle-aged with kind eyes, stepped forward. "Well, that's wonderful news. Welcome, Mrs. Carson. I'm Lucia Mendoza. I cook for the hands and help around the place. It'll be nice to have another woman here." The men introduced themselves one by one. Sam Pritchard was the foreman, and he was 45 years old and had worked with Grant since the beginning. There was young Tommy Chen, barely 20, who handled the horses. Marcus Freeman, a former Buffalo soldier who managed the cattle. Jesus and Pablo Mendoza, Lucia's husband and son, who did general ranch work. And old Henry Watts, who served as the ranch's handyman and storyteller. They all seemed genuinely pleased about the marriage, though Katherine suspected they were also surprised. Grant clearly hadn't mentioned her in his letters home, probably wanting to be sure of her answer before raising expectations. The ranch house was simple but well built, a 2-story structure with a wide porch. Inside, it was sparsely furnished but clean. Lucia had clearly been keeping it maintained in Grant's absence. Katherine walked through the rooms, trying to envision herself living here, making this place a home. "What do you think?" Grant asked anxiously. He had sent the workers away and was showing her around personally. "I think it's perfect," Katherine said, and she meant it. The house had good bones, and with some effort it could be truly comfortable. "We'll need furniture, curtains, all the things that make a house a home, but we can work on that together." Grant visibly relaxed. "I was worried you might find it too rough, too different from what you're used to." "Grant, I was scrubbing floors in a boarding house a month ago. This is paradise by comparison." She took his hand. "Besides, I didn't marry you for your house. I married you for you." That first night in their new home, Grant built a fire in the fireplace despite the warm evening, saying it made things more cheerful. They sat together on the single sofa, Katherine's head on Grant's shoulder, and talked about their plans for the ranch. "I want to expand the herd," Grant said. "We've got room for at least 1,000 head, maybe more, and I want to develop the horse breeding operation. There's real money in good horses, especially with the Army contracts." "What about the workers' children?" Katherine asked. "You mentioned possibly starting a school." "Were you serious about that?" completely serious. Pablo has two younger siblings who would benefit from education. Tommy can barely read and write, and he's eager to learn. Even some of the older hands would probably appreciate lessons if you were willing to teach them. Katherine felt excitement stir in her chest. Her dream of teaching, modified but not abandoned. I'd love that. We could start small, just a few hours each day. I could teach reading, writing, basic arithmetic. Maybe history and geography for the more advanced students. We'll build a proper schoolhouse eventually, Grant promised. But for now, you could use the room off the kitchen. It's meant to be a pantry, but it's plenty big enough. Over the following weeks, Katherine threw herself into making the ranch her home. She sewed curtains for the windows, brought in wildflowers to brighten the rooms, and began teaching lessons in the makeshift schoolroom. She had 5 students initially. Pablo's siblings, Miguel and Rosa, both eager and bright. Tommy Chen, who was frustrated by his own illiteracy but determined to learn. And surprisingly, both Sam Pritchard and Marcus Freeman, who joined the evening sessions after their work was done. Katherine had never been happier. Teaching brought her immense satisfaction, but it was her marriage to Grant that truly filled her heart. He was everything she could have hoped for in a husband and more. He respected her intelligence, supported her work, and loved her with a devotion that sometimes took her breath away. They worked together on the ranch, true partners in building their future. Grant taught her to ride, first on gentle old horses, then on more spirited mounts. He showed her how the ranch operated, involved her in decisions about the herd and the horses. He never treated her as inferior or incapable, always assuming she could learn whatever was necessary. One evening, about 2 months after their arrival at the ranch, Katherine was in the kitchen helping Lucia prepare dinner. The older woman had become a friend, teaching Katherine about cooking for ranch hands and sharing stories about her family. "You've made Grant very happy," Lucia said as she kneaded bread dough. "I've worked here 3 years and I've never seen him like this. He used to be so serious, always working, never taking time for joy. Now he smiles all the time. That's your doing." Katherine felt warmth spread through her chest. "He's made me happy too. I came west with such different expectations, but I wouldn't change anything. This life, this place, Grant, it's better than anything I imagined. That's how it should be. Marriage is work, don't mistake me. But when you've found the right person, the work is worth it." Lucia shaped the dough into loaves and set them aside to rise. "Have you thought about children? You and Grant would make beautiful babies." Katherine blushed. "We've talked about it. We both want children eventually. But we're in no rush. We're enjoying having time, just the 2 of us right now." In truth, Katherine had been feeling strange lately. Her courses were late, and she had been oddly tired and queasy in the mornings. She hadn't said anything to Grant yet, not wanting to raise false hopes, but she suspected she might already be pregnant. The thought filled her with equal parts excitement and terror. That night, as they lay in bed, Grant traced lazy patterns on her arm. "What are you thinking about?" "You've been quiet all evening." Katherine hesitated, then decided she couldn't keep the secret any longer. "I think I might be with child." Grant went completely still, then he propped himself up on one elbow to look at her face. "Truly, are you sure?" "Not completely sure. But all the signs are there. I'm late, I've been feeling ill in the mornings, and I'm exhausted all the time." She searched his face anxiously. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy." Grant's voice was choked with emotion. "Katherine, I'm overwhelmed. A baby, our baby, of course I'm happy. Are you?" "I know we said we wanted to wait." "I'm terrified and thrilled in equal measure, but yes, I'm happy. I want to have your children, Grant. I want to build a family with you." He kissed her then, tender and sweet, and Katherine felt her fears ease. Whatever came, they would face it together. Her pregnancy was confirmed by the doctor in the nearest town, a 3-hour ride from the ranch. Dr. Morrison was an elderly man who had practiced medicine for 40 years. He examined Katherine and pronounced her in good health. Baby should arrive sometime in late spring, maybe early April. You're young and strong. I don't anticipate any problems, but send for me if anything seems wrong. The news spread through the ranch quickly, and everyone seemed genuinely delighted. Lucia appointed herself Katherine's guardian, insisting she rest more and refusing to let her do any heavy work. Sam and the other hands started building a cradle and other furniture for the baby. Tommy, with Katherine's help, was learning to read well enough that he started practicing by reading children's books aloud, preparing for the baby's arrival. Winter came to the valley, bringing rain and cooler temperatures. Katherine continued teaching, though she tired more easily now. Her belly grew round, and she felt the baby move inside her, tiny flutters that became stronger kicks as the months passed. Grant was endlessly fascinated by her changing body, often placing his hand on her stomach to feel the baby kick. "Hello in there," he would say softly. "I'm your papa. I can't wait to meet you." Katherine would watch him with love so intense it almost hurt. This man, who had shown her kindness when she was at her lowest, who had offered her not just security but partnership and devotion, he was going to be the father of her child. It seemed almost too wonderful to be real. In January, disaster struck. A winter storm, fiercer than any the valley had seen in years, swept down from the mountains. The temperature dropped below freezing, and snow fell for 3 days straight. Grant and the hands worked around the clock to bring the cattle closer to the barn, to ensure the horses were sheltered, to keep everything functioning in the brutal conditions. On the second night of the storm, Marcus Freeman didn't return with the others. Grant's face went pale when he realized. He was checking the north pasture. He should have been back hours ago. "You can't go out in this," Katherine said, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. The wind was howling like a living thing and visibility was nearly zero. "I have to. Marcus could be hurt or lost. I can't leave him out there." Grant was already pulling on extra layers, preparing to face the storm. "Then I'm coming with you." Katherine reached for her coat. "Absolutely not. You're pregnant, Katherine. I won't risk you and the baby. And I won't sit here wondering if you're alive or dead." Katherine's voice rose with fear and frustration. "At least take Sam with you. Don't go alone." In the end, Grant, Sam, and Jesus set out into the storm while Katherine waited with Lucia and the others, praying desperately for their safe return. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Katherine paced the kitchen despite Lucia's urging to rest, one hand on her swollen belly, the other clutching the windowsill as she stared out into the white darkness. Finally, near dawn, she heard voices outside. She rushed to the door and saw them, Grant and Sam supporting Marcus between them, Jesus leading the horses. They were all covered in snow, moving slowly, but they were alive. They brought Marcus inside, and Katherine saw that his leg was badly hurt, possibly broken. Dr. Morrison couldn't be reached in the storm, so Katherine drew on half-remembered lessons from a medical text her father had owned. With Lucia's help, she cleaned and splinted Marcus's leg, gave him whiskey for the pain, and made him as comfortable as possible. Grant was shaking with cold and exhaustion. Katherine got him out of his wet clothes and into bed, piling blankets on him. She held him as his shaking gradually subsided, whispering thanks to God that he had returned safely. "That was incredibly stupid and incredibly brave," she said when he had warmed enough to speak. "I couldn't leave Marcus out there." Grant's voice was hoarse. "He's my responsibility, they all are, I know. And that's one of the reasons I love you, but Grant, I need you to understand something. You have a responsibility to me and our child, too. I need you to come home. I need you alive." He pulled her closer, careful of her pregnant belly. "You're right. I'm sorry I frightened you, but Katherine, I would never not go after someone who needed help. That's not who I am." "I know. And I wouldn't want you to be anyone else." She kissed his forehead. "Just promise me you'll be careful, that you'll take help when you need it, like you did tonight. Don't try to be a hero alone." "I promise." The storm finally broke on the fourth day. When they could assess the damage, they found they had lost about 30 head of cattle, frozen in the pastures. It was a significant loss, but it could have been much worse. Marcus's leg would heal, though he would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. And Grant had proven something Katherine already knew. He was a man who would risk everything to help those in his care. Spring came slowly to the valley, but when it arrived, it transformed the ranch into a paradise of green grass and wildflowers. Katherine's pregnancy had advanced to the point where she could no longer teach standing up, so she conducted lessons sitting in a comfortable chair while her students gathered around her. Her back ached constantly, and she couldn't see her own feet, but she had never felt more alive, more purposeful. Grant was attentive to the point of being overprotective. He wanted her to rest constantly, to do nothing that might strain her. Katherine bore this with amused patience, understanding that his anxiety came from love. "The baby will come when it's ready," she told him. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. I'll be fine." But privately, she was nervous too. Childbirth was dangerous, especially out here far from proper medical care. She had seen enough of frontier life to know that not all stories had happy endings. She tried not to think about it, focusing instead on preparing for the baby's arrival. Lucia helped her sew tiny clothes, and Sam presented her with the cradle he had built, beautifully carved with horses and stars. Katherine cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by the kindness these people had shown her. On a warm afternoon in early April, Katherine felt the first contractions. She was in the garden, showing young Rosa how to identify different plants when a wave of pain gripped her belly. She gasped and had to sit down on the ground. Rosa's eyes went wide with alarm. "Mrs. Carson, are you okay?" "I'm fine. The baby is coming, that's all." Katherine tried to keep her voice calm. "Go get Lucia and Mr. Carson. Quickly now." The next hours passed in a blur of pain and effort. Lucia took charge with calm efficiency, having delivered several babies in her time. Grant stayed by Katherine's side, holding her hand, his face pale with worry. Dr. Morrison had been sent for, but there was no telling if he would arrive in time. The pain was worse than Katherine had imagined, waves of agony that seemed to split her apart. She cried out despite trying to stay quiet, gripping Grant's hand so hard she was sure she was breaking his fingers. He never flinched, just stayed beside her, murmuring encouragement, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "You're doing wonderfully," Lucia said. "Not much longer now." "I can see the baby's head." Katherine pushed with all her strength, past pain into some other realm entirely, and then, suddenly, there was release and relief, and a thin wail filled the room. "It's a boy," Lucia announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket. "A healthy boy." She placed the baby in Katherine's arms, and Katherine looked down at her son through tears. He was red-faced and wrinkled, with a dusting of blonde hair. His tiny hands waved in the air, and his eyes, dark blue like all newborns, blinked up at her. "Hello," she whispered. "Hello, little one." Grant was crying openly, his hand gentle on the baby's head. "He's perfect. Katherine, you're amazing. He's perfect." Dr. Morrison arrived an hour later to find mother and baby both doing well. He examined them both and pronounced himself satisfied. "You did good work, Lucia, and Mrs. Carson. You're a strong woman. The baby is healthy, good size, everything looks fine." They named him Gabriel Carson, Gabriel for the angel, and because Katherine liked the sound of it. Little Gabriel proved to be a good baby, crying only when hungry or wet, sleeping in the beautiful cradle Sam had made. Katherine had never known such exhaustion or such joy. Caring for an infant was relentless work, but every time she looked at her son, at Grant cradling him with such tender care, she felt blessed beyond measure. The ranch work continued around them. Katherine couldn't teach for the first few weeks after Gabriel's birth, but she returned to it as soon as she felt able, with Gabriel sleeping in a basket nearby while she conducted lessons. Her students were fascinated by the baby, and even tough, old Sam would sometimes pause his work to peer in at the sleeping infant. As Gabriel grew from infant to baby, Katherine watched Grant transform into a devoted father. He would spend hours playing with their son, reading to him, carrying him around the ranch to show him the horses and cattle. Watching them together, Katherine's heart would swell with love so profound it bordered on pain. She had come west seeking independence, seeking to escape an arranged marriage, and instead she had found this. A man who loved her with unwavering devotion, a home she had helped build, work that fulfilled her, and a child who embodied the future. She had asked only for kindness from the harsh frontier, but Grant had given her so much more. He had given her partnership, respect, passion, and a love she had never imagined possible. 2 years after Gabriel's birth, Katherine gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Grace. She had Grant's blue-green eyes and Katherine's dark hair, and she was as spirited as her brother was calm. With 2 children, the ranch house felt full and alive, ringing with laughter and occasional tears. The school Katherine had started had grown. The workers' children still attended, but word had spread to neighboring ranches, and now she had 12 students of varying ages. Grant built a proper schoolhouse, a small but well-constructed building with real desks and a blackboard he had ordered from San Francisco. Katherine stood at the front of her classroom one autumn morning, watching her students bent over their slates, practicing their letters. Gabriel, now 3 years old, sat in the corner playing quietly with wooden blocks. Through the window, she could see Grant working with a young horse in the corral, patient and gentle as always. Grace was at home with Lucia, probably getting into mischief. This was her life now, so different from anything she had imagined growing up in Philadelphia. She had expected to marry a merchant or a lawyer, to live in a fine house in the city, to be a lady of leisure. Instead, she was a rancher's wife on the California frontier, teaching children in a one-room schoolhouse, her hands roughened by work, her skin tanned by the sun. And she had never been happier. That evening, after the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Katherine and Grant sat on their porch watching the stars emerge. Grant's arm was around her shoulders and she leaned into his warmth. "You ever regret it?" Grant asked quietly. "Leaving the city, coming west, marrying me? You gave up the life you were supposed to have." Katherine thought about the question seriously. She thought about the girl she had been, stepping off the stagecoach in Owyhee with nothing but a carpetbag and broken dreams. She thought about scrubbing floors at the boarding house, her hands red and raw. She thought about that first evening walk with Grant, when she had begun to hope for something better. "I don't regret a single thing," she said finally. "The life I was supposed to have would have destroyed me. This life, the one I chose with you, has made me more than I ever thought I could be. You've given me everything, Grant, everything that matters." "You gave me everything too," Grant said, tightening his arm around her. "I was so lonely before you came, Katherine. I didn't even realize how lonely until I met you. You brought light into my life, purpose beyond just surviving and building the ranch. You gave me love and family and joy." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the vast California sky spread above them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The cattle lowed softly in their pasture. The night air was cool and sweet with the scent of grass and wildflowers. "I love you," Katherine said softly. "I don't say it enough, but I do, so much. I love you too. Always have, from almost the moment we met. Always will." Grant kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, on this life. Thank you for saying yes." Katherine closed her eyes, feeling utterly at peace. She had come west asking only for kindness, for a chance to build an independent life. Instead, she had found Grant, who had shown her kindness beyond measure and then given her something infinitely more precious: his devotion, his partnership, his unwavering love. He had helped her build not just an independent life, but a full life, rich with purpose and meaning and joy. The years rolled on, bringing their share of challenges and triumphs. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle lost to disease and horses sold at profit. Katherine's school continued to grow, and several of her students went on to higher education, a source of immense pride for her. Gabriel and Grace were joined by two more children, twins named Henry and Hope, who brought chaos and laughter in equal measure. Grant's ranch became one of the most successful in the region, known for its quality horses and well-managed cattle herd. But he never let success change him. He remained the kind, generous man Katherine had fallen in love with, always ready to help a neighbor, always fair with his workers, always devoted to his family. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Grant surprised Katherine with a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with Lucia and spent a week in the city, staying at a fine hotel, attending the theater, dining at elegant restaurants. Katherine wore beautiful dresses Grant bought for her and felt like a grand lady. But when they returned to the ranch, dusty and tired from the journey, Katherine felt nothing but relief. This was home. Not San Francisco with its sophistication and culture, but this valley with its wide skies and hard work and beloved faces. "I had a wonderful time," she told Grant that night as they lay in their own bed. "But I'm so glad to be home." "Me too." Grant pulled her close. "This is where we belong, together with our family building our life. I wouldn't trade it for anything." Neither would Katherine. She had found her place in the world, not despite the hardships she had faced but because of them. She had asked only for kindness when she had nothing, and Grant had given her devotion beyond anything she had imagined possible. In return, she had given him her love, her loyalty, her whole heart. Their love story wasn't one of grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements. It was quieter than that, built on daily choices, on small kindnesses, on working together toward common goals. It was Grant bringing her coffee in the morning and Katherine mending his shirts by lamplight. It was teaching their children together and facing financial worries as partners. It was laughter and passion, and sometimes arguments, but always the knowledge that they were on the same side, always. When Katherine was 35, with 4 children ranging from Gabriel at 13 to the twins at 7, she found herself pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the others, leaving her exhausted and ill. Grant worried constantly, but Katherine was determined to see it through. Their 5th child, a son they named Matthew, arrived on a snowy February morning. He was smaller than the others had been, more delicate but healthy. Katherine held him and marveled that after all these years, she and Grant were still creating new life together, still building their family. Gabriel was old enough now to help significantly on the ranch. He had his father's way with horses and his mother's quick mind. Grace, 11 years old, showed signs of becoming a teacher herself, often helping Katherine with the younger students. The twins were wild and mischievous, keeping everyone on their toes. The school had become a permanent fixture in the valley. Katherine had trained 2 assistant teachers, young women from neighboring ranches, to help her. Between them, they educated nearly 30 children. Katherine had also started a small lending library, ordering books from San Francisco and making them available to anyone in the community who wanted to read. Grant often joked that Katherine had brought more civilization to the valley than all the churches and law officers combined. But he said it with pride, supporting her projects with time and money, building shelves for her library, and helping organize community gatherings where people could come together. They celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a party that the whole valley attended. Long tables were set up under the oak trees near the house, laden with food that everyone had contributed. There was music and dancing, children running wild, and speeches that grew increasingly sentimental as the evening wore on. Sam Pritchard, now in his 60s and still working as foreman, raised a glass to the couple. 20 years ago, Grant came back from Nevada with a bride none of us expected. We thought he'd gone crazy, marrying so quick. But Katherine, you proved us all wrong. You've been the making of this ranch, of this community, of Grant himself. Here's to 20 more years. Everyone drank to that, and Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. She looked around at the gathered faces, at the community they had built, at her children laughing with their friends, at Grant beside her, his hand warm in hers. This was what a life well lived looked like. Not wealth or prestige, but love and purpose and connection. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Grant pulled Katherine onto the makeshift dance floor. They swayed together to a waltz played somewhat unevenly by a hastily assembled band. Katherine rested her head on Grant's shoulder, feeling utterly content. "Happy anniversary, my love," Grant murmured in her ear. "Happy anniversary. 20 years. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like forever. Other days it feels like we just met yesterday." Grant pulled back to look at her face, still beautiful to him despite the lines that time and sun had etched there. "You're even more lovely than the day I married you," Katherine laughed. "Liar. I'm old and weathered. You're distinguished and magnificent." Grant's expression turned serious. "Katherine, these 20 years with you have been the greatest blessing of my life. Every day I wake up grateful that you said yes to that walk, yes to marrying me, yes to building this life together. You've given me everything." "We've given each other everything," Katherine corrected softly. "That's what partnership means, Grant. We built this together." They danced until the stars came out, until the children grew tired and cranky, until the guests began to drift home. That night, in their bed, they made love with the comfortable familiarity of long marriage, but also with passion that had never quite faded. Afterward, Katherine lay in Grant's arms and thought about the journey that had brought them here. She had been so young when she stepped off that stagecoach in Owyhee, so full of fear and hope in equal measure. She had asked the frontier for only a small kindness, a chance to survive and maintain her dignity. Instead, she had found Grant, who had looked at her and seen not just a desperate woman but a partner, a love, a future. He had given her kindness, yes, but also so much more. Respect, support, passion, devotion beyond anything she had imagined possible. And in return, she had given him her whole heart, had built a life with him that was richer and fuller than any dream. The years continued to pass, as years do. Gabriel married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch and started his own small spread with help from Grant. Grace went to San Francisco to train as a teacher, then returned to take over Katherine's school when she finally decided to retire. The twins went into business together, breeding horses like their father. Young Matthew, always the dreamer, talked about becoming a lawyer. Katherine and Grant grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies growing less strong but their love remaining constant. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, the ranch house always full of visiting family. Grant's hands, roughened by decades of ranch work, grew arthritic, but they still sought out Katherine's hands to hold. Katherine's voice, which had taught hundreds of children over the years, grew softer, but it still read to Grant each evening before bed. On a warm spring evening, when Katherine was 67 and Grant was 71, they sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The valley spread before them, green and beautiful, dotted with cattle and horses. In the distance, they could see Gabriel's house, smoke rising from its chimney. Grace was at the school preparing for the next day's lessons. The twins were working in the barn, their laughter carrying on the breeze. "It's a good life we've built," Grant said, his hand finding Katherine's as naturally as breathing. "The best life," Katherine agreed. "Better than anything I imagined when I was young. Do you remember that first walk we took in Owyhee, when I asked if I could court you?" Katherine smiled. "I remember everything about those days, how scared I was, how lost I felt, how you looked at me and made me feel like I mattered. You did matter. You do matter. Katherine, you've been the center of my world for over 40 years. Every good thing in my life flows from you." She turned to look at him, this man who had shown her such devotion, who had kept every promise he had ever made to her. His face was deeply lined now, his hair white, but his eyes were still that same striking blue-green that had captured her attention so long ago. "I love you," she said simply. "I will always love you, Grant Carson, in this life and whatever comes after. And I will always love you, Katherine Carson. You asked me for nothing but kindness. I gave you everything I had, and still it wasn't enough to show you how much you mean to me. It was more than enough. It was everything." Katherine leaned over and kissed him soft and sweet. "We've had a good run, haven't we? The best. And we're not done yet. Still have years ahead of us." They did have years ahead, several more of them. Years of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, of watching their family flourish, of seeing the valley prosper and grow. Years of sitting on that porch together, hands intertwined, watching the sun set over the land they had built their life on. When Grant finally passed, at the age of 79, it was peacefully in his sleep with Katherine beside him. She woke to find him gone and felt as if half of herself had been torn away. The pain was immense, but so was the gratitude. They had had nearly 50 years together, a lifetime of love and partnership. Katherine lived 4 more years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, supported by the community she had helped build. She continued to read, to tend her garden, to watch the valley turn through its seasons. But part of her was always waiting, ready to be reunited with Grant. When her time came, on a quiet autumn evening with Grace holding her hand, Katherine's last thoughts were of that dusty Nevada town where her life had truly begun. She thought of stepping off the stagecoach with nothing but hope and desperation. She thought of Grant walking into the boarding house, of that first smile that had made her heart flutter. She thought of 50 years of mornings waking beside him, of building a life together out of love and hard work and unwavering devotion. She had asked only for kindness, and he had given her everything. And in the end, wasn't that the greatest love story of all? Not one of grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements, but of 2 people choosing each other every day, building a life together one small moment at a time, loving each other through all the joys and sorrows that life brought. Katherine closed her eyes and let go, peaceful and ready. She had lived a full life, loved deeply and been loved in return. The story that had begun in the dust of Owyhee had reached its natural conclusion, and it was a good ending. Not sad, but satisfying. Complete. In the valley where they had made their home, the ranch continued under Gabriel's management. The school that Katherine had started still educated children, now run by Grace's daughter. The library she had founded still lent books to anyone who wanted to read. The community they had helped build continued to thrive. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew down from the mountains and the cattle lowed softly in their pastures, people would sometimes speak of Grant and Katherine Carson, of the cowboy who had traveled to Nevada and returned with an unexpected bride, of the Eastern lady who had come west seeking independence and found partnership instead, of a love story that had lasted a lifetime, built on kindness and devotion and the simple choice to face life together. Their graves lay side by side under an oak tree on a hill overlooking the valley, marked with simple stones that bore their names and dates. But their real monument was all around, in the thriving ranch, in the educated children, in the strong community, in the family that carried on their legacy of hard work and kindness and love. They had asked life for only small things and received abundance in return. They had found each other in the harsh frontier and built something beautiful together. They had loved deeply and truly, and that love had rippled outward, touching countless lives, creating something that would endure long after they were gone. It was, in every sense, a love story for the ages. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it was real. Two people, imperfect and human, choosing each other and building a life together through all the challenges and joys that life brought. Grant had given Katherine devotion beyond anything she imagined possible, and she had given him the same in return. Together, they had created something magnificent, a love that lasted a lifetime and a legacy that would endure for generations. And if love stories need happy endings, theirs had one. Not because everything was always perfect, but because they faced it all together, with kindness and devotion and unwavering commitment. They lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask for than that?